Welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Bob Sellers with Heather Childers. Former President Trump's lawsuit against big tech corporations like Facebook, Twitter, and Google could break some ground, possibly First Amendment protection. Certainly the effort is to give the right of people to have free speech, even though we know that that's extended to the government. Earlier we spoke with Brooke Rollins, who spoke at yesterday's announcement in Bedminster, weighing in on this. She did with us.
All the time we were there, we talked quite a bit about what was happening and how the First Amendment and the Constitution and the founders of our country never envisioned a time where our town halls would become virtual and controlled by one or two or three, basically oligarchs and big, huge companies. So how do we push back against that? Parallel to that, after we left and launched the America First Policy Institute with a lot of former cabinet members and some of the superstars from the White House, we started really thinking through how can we move this issue forward. We can't stand down and just say, well, I guess there's not much we can do. And so we began talking with some of the best lawyers in the country. We launched our constitutional litigation partnership. We obviously were in lots of conversations with the president, former president of the United States, and ultimately all the stars aligned and decided that it was time to fight back.
If I need a lawyer, I want her.
Yeah.
She's right on top of this.
Yeah, she's really good.
Sharp cookie that we spoke to a little while ago. Let's bring in Stacy Washington here. From what you saw yesterday and the conversations you've heard, Stacy, what's your take on what's going on here?
Well, you know, Bob, I've been waiting, and if I had a direct line to President Trump, I would say to him, like, can you pick a social media platform so we can all jump off Facebook and be with you? But it looks as if he's actually taking the battle to them. He's refusing to allow them to have the final word on whether or not he, as a private citizen or when he was the president, had the ability to speak to Americans freely as others have done. I notice almost every day there's someone who highlights a terrorist or a terrorist group or someone who routinely flouts the rules that Twitter and Facebook said that President Trump violated, and they still have accounts. They're still able to spread their messages of hate and vitriol. And so he's right. Many of us have been censored. He has been censored in the worst possible way. He's the biggest example of this. And I'm glad he's doing this. I'm glad he's taking them on. He has a habit of winning in court, so let's see how this plays out.
Now, we know a lot of this has to do with the Section 230. And here's what Mr. Trump had to say regarding Section 230 yesterday.
Other companies in our country, and even in our country's history, have had protection like this. It's, in effect, a massive government subsidy. These companies have been co-opted, coerced, and weaponized by government and by government actors to become the enforcers of illegal, unconstitutional censorship.
Now, Section 230 protects the companies as just operating as platforms, that something can be said there on their platform and they can't be sued for it. Here's what Justice Clarence Thomas said, though, blasting it back. He said this, as Twitter made clear, the right to cut off speech lies most powerfully in the hands of private digital platforms. The extent to which that power matters for purposes of the First Amendment and the extent to which that power could lawfully be modified raise interesting and important questions. And I think everybody would agree here, AJ, that these are interesting and important questions.
Yes, because the way that these platforms operate has changed so much. When I was in middle school, I got my first Facebook account, and it was just a way for me to connect with my friends. Now it's become an ad platform. It's become the main place that companies and political candidates advertise. So it's a completely different landscape now where people are actually making a living off of these things. And if Facebook decides they don't like your message, like they did recently with Naomi Wolf, like they did recently with Brett Weinstein, YouTube did, they demonetized PragerU. So basically they can say, you can create this content, you can have people watching, and we're going to kick you off because we don't like what you're saying.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that when President Trump was kicked off, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the president of Mexico, Obrador, multiple different world leaders called this out and said, you can't do this. This is problematic. This is not just a conservative or a liberal thing. This is the fact that these social media companies have become oligarchs and are too powerful.
Yeah.
And we check that.
Yeah, Heather, I think that's one of the concerns. People look at this and they know inherently, by their gut, something's wrong with this. Because today it could be against Republicans, tomorrow it's against Democrats. The fact that these platforms are deciding that. Now, we know what their political inclination has been.
Right.
But there seems something wrong about it.
And the problem is, you know, is it a private company, a social media company, or is it a matter of the public square, has been explained to us before? And then the other problem is when they work together in unison to, you know, band together and silence certain voices, which is why I think it was just today 36 attorneys generals from different states have come together and they're suing involving Google specifically, the antitrust violations.
But Facebook has been sued. I mean, this has been going on for a while. Trey, your thoughts on this?
I'm a conservative, and I, as a conservative and or libertarian, vehemently oppose the government getting involved, telling private companies what they should or should not do. If we take this apart, Section 230 has nothing to do with censoring people. It is a protection, but it actually protects the smaller guy more than it does Facebook, Amazon, Google, or Twitter. If somebody posts something on their website, a blog that somebody's got, someone has a diary and they allow people to chime in, a store that allows for reviews, the company hosting that website cannot be held liable for anything that is placed on there. That's what Section 230 essentially does. I think that we get into a real scary situation when we start hearing supposed free market, small government Republicans talking about doing this, because it is neither free market and it certainly is not smaller government. I think, as you started to kind of circle back to what you, Heather and Bob, were saying about questions and concerns. Yes, there are valid questions and concerns. President Trump was treated unfairly when you got Rouhani, a Muslim, a radical cleric from Iran, on Twitter and Facebook, as well as Hamas and Hezbollah. It is unfair. I think if there's any area, and now this is me totally contradicting myself and my libertarian views, if there's anywhere that maybe we could begin, I think it's important for Democrats and Republicans or any political affiliation to try to come together and see whether or not there is some form of regulation that would allow paid advertisements to go through and not have any censorship whatsoever. And that is pretty much in line with the way that television is held accountable today under FEC regulations, as well as radio. And I think that maybe if there's any kind of area for regulation, it could be something in that manner.
Because we have to wrap up, but Trey, that's what I was saying. I mean, is there a difference, though? And I'm not for government regulation either. Less regulation, the better. But you have these companies that really are silencing people across the board, and so that public square argument continues to get played versus you know, individually owned companies.
And the easy answer would be, and I think Trey, you'd agree, competition. Have another place where you can go. But that's been very hard to compete against these behemoths. Because
they band together and then silence the competition.
Exactly. And so it keeps on going. So I don't know where this goes, but I think everybody knows.
They do. Two very quick things to wrap up with. Stacy hit the nail on the head by saying, I sure wish Donald Trump would go somewhere and we could all rally around that. That's the beauty of private markets. Obviously,
he tried.
though,
remember Parler?
Right. And they shut it down. Competition is not enough. There is time when regulation, like you said, has to step in, and this is an opportunity for them to do that. You cannot kick.
I'll tell you, though, it's pretty scary when you see insider publications like Politico and Axios. Go look at the advertisements in there. Who's advertising for regulation? Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon. Why? Because they want it. Every time that we have regulation,
they can control the conversation right now. They can control the conversation right now with Democrats in power.
They will write that law.
Exactly. That's we're agreeing with that. So
tough spot.
We'll see where this ends up. Thank you, panel.